I would like to take a moment before we get into today's main episode and to talk about my sponsor for the podcast. Podmatch is a new podcasting site dedicated to all podcasters. The platform helps hosts get connected with potential guests to appear on their show, as well as allow guests to find podcasts that will give them a chance to share their story. Podmatch offers many tools to help organize your page, from to-do lists to episode planning to potentially appearing on a leaderboard. Podmatch has it all. The best part, you have the potential to get paid. And who doesn't like to get paid from home? I like to. With an easy sign up, you can start connecting with podcasters and guests immediately. I have been a part of Podmatch since the beginning of May, and I have got to say that it was the best decision I've ever made because Podmatch helps your podcast grow. It helps you get connected with people that have very interesting, very compelling background stories that are just waiting for their story to be shared. So if you are a host or guest and would like to start building professional relationships, explore more opportunities, and have your story shared, I highly suggest that you sign up with Podmatch today by going to joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to start expanding your network in seconds. I would like to give another huge thank you to Podmatch for sponsoring this episode. Now on to our main episode, and again, you can sign up at joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to begin your podcasting journey today. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Lethal Venom Podcast, the show where I talk about anything I want with the honest to God truth, no lies told. Today, I'm joined by Mr. Eric Klos. He is the founder and CEO of DailyBreath, which is a cloud-based SAAS company delivering personalized environmental insights for better health outcomes. DailyBreath is an environmental health intelligence and wellness platform leveraging a mobile app available via the Google Play and Apple App stores that helps people to track symptoms, pinpoint their personal triggers, and reduce potential health impacts. But their motto: track, learn, know, and take action. Because it's personal, it's about the air you breathe and your health. Our mission is to help everyone breathe easier one symptom at a time. Their goal is to become the largest environmental health intelligence and wellness platform tracking acute symptoms and health impacts related to the air we breathe every day. Another vision is a day when potentially preventable bad health outcomes as a result of the air we breathe are reduced and ultimately avoided. So, Eric, thank you so much for wanting to come on the show today. I think this is a very interesting program that you have going on. So, if you could kind of introduce yourself and kind of share a little bit more about what Daily Breath is all about.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the opportunity, Noah. It's glad to be on the show. Daily Breath, I started about 10 years ago, which is quite a while ago. But I had a notion, I kind of had a light bulb moment. My sister has rheumatoid arthritis, and she was living with my family at the time. And she came down one morning and said, it'd be cool if there was a mobile app that would tell me when my RA is going to flare up. And it just struck me as a very interesting idea, the intersection of weather and the environment and health conditions. In her case, humidity, barometric pressure, rain fronts, precipitation events, tend to make her rheumatoid arthritis flare up. And so, I'm very much a lifelong learner. And so I started to investigate the world of environment and health and realized that, there were really four different categories at the time that I was seeing most of the research around: respiratory conditions, cardiovascular conditions, arthritis and joint pain, and then migraines and headaches. And so I looked a little bit deeper and realized in the case of respiratory and cardiovascular, and certainly over the last 10 years, we've seen this more and more. There's just more and more severe outcomes associated with the environment impacting people who have respiratory and cardiovascular conditions. And so I focused Daily Breath initially on allergies and asthma. And then, certainly COVID and some of the things going on around that have really highlighted that it's not allergies and asthma, it's not just COPD, but there are significant health impacts across the board of the pollutants that are in our air, outdoors, as well as now there's a growing body of evidence that indoor air quality is pretty poor as well. And so at the time, I have a background in kind of healthcare technology, very focused on digital health, big data, all those kinds of things. And I just realized there was this opportunity potentially to create a mobile app that would track these weather and environmental variables, allow an individual to track symptoms or how they were feeling on an individual basis, daily basis, and track over time using AI and machine learning, kind of what's their personalized risk, because what most of the models out there for addressing air quality are really public health models where the information is very distributed and it's broadcast to you, and it only defines the severity of the air quality, not necessarily your personal risk, right? So, risk is a product of how individually sensitive to a particular pollutant are you, and then what's the personal susceptibility to experiencing symptoms based on your own physiology, right? So it's a combination of the two. If you have somebody who has asthma, the trigger is something that causes your airways to restrict. And you may have, if you have asthma, you have more of a propensity or a susceptibility to having that vulnerability to a specific pollutant, right? And so that was what I really wanted to marry, was this kind of personalized environmental health approach that I didn't see out in the market space. Um, and it's been quite a long time. My first product was introduced in 2017. The first two versions of the product were iOS versions, Apple versions, and then in literally during COVID, I did my last development effort, or my most recent development effort, to release it on both platforms, the Google platform as well as the Apple platform. In 2022, that went out to the market, and I've getting traction. I've got over 57,000 downloads. I have over 12,000 users of the app, almost to 1,000 monthly active users. And so people are definitely, beginning to adopt the technology. And now there's a lot more technology opportunities, I think, to advance the platform. And I'm hoping to do that in 2026.
Was it difficult to, when it comes to building an app and kind of getting this app off the ground, did you have any prior knowledge about how marketing works when it comes to app design and app publishing? And what's the kind of the process of getting an app process and available to be downloaded on all these platforms?
Right. Well, I would just say it's a journey. I would not say I have accomplished it perfectly yet. But I think because I can be very candid with you, I've had four different developers over an 8 or 9 year period, right? So that's been a constant process of trying to find the right development partner to activate your vision, right, for how the product should be deployed. But initially, that's essentially what I did, was put a set of requirements together of what I thought it looked like, and presented it to some developers and had them starting working on it. And then you try to get feedback from your community as you deploy it, and refine the UI, the user interface. And then you indicated the other part, which is kind of the marketing part, right? I mean, the challenge for me is the app is really a business to consumer. So I'm selling direct to the consumer via these app stores, right? And so you have to generate traction through social media, and through various low budget marketing opportunities, right? And so most of what I've done is blogging, and talking about the topics, because quite frankly, it's a big education process. I mean, what I consistently talk about is ultimately what I'm trying to bring to people is, the urgency for them to be environmentally aware, that they should use daily breaths so that they gain some environmental intelligence about the air they breathe. and that'll translate into preventative action, right? So that they can avoid these negative health outcomes. And so that's a big education process. Yeah, and that's constantly what I'm trying to encourage people to understand. Um, I think also COVID, climate change, a lot indoor air quality emphasis, a lot of things are now converging in a way where people, you know, understand the problem, right? Yeah, you'll see in a couple days, I'm publishing a blog called "Stop Inhaling the Problem," and that's an interesting topic because for a long portion of time, it's been stop the problem, stop the problem. Well, what's the problem? The problem is pollution, right? So the entire emphasis has been on stopping the problem at the source, which is the pollution, right? And that's where you've gotten a lot of the initiatives around climate change with greenhouse gas emissions and stuff like that. But my focus is really on stop inhaling the problem. We're not at the mercy of the weather and the environment, and there are things that you can do, take preventative action, be more environmentally aware of what's causing you to have symptoms, right? Or health impacts and take preventative action, whether that means changing your, HVAC air filter more frequently, whether that means having an air purifier in your home. There's various steps that we can take to basically clean or clear the air we breathe, not perfectly, but certainly enough that we may not experience health symptoms and health impacts, right? So that's been my big challenge, is really trying to figure out, A, building the best product that I can and deploying it to the market via the app stores. And then at the same time, marketing in a way that compels people to purchase the app and then start this journey of really focusing their attention on how their environment is impacting their health.
So, when it comes to when people open the app, what can people really expect when they download the app and open it and use it for the first time?
Yeah, so the opening thing, what happens is they will see a daily breath forecast. That's the first thing that they see. And what that right now includes is a risk index. And so the way we calculate the risk the index initially is I went down to Asheville, North Carolina, and engaged some climate scientists. They did a 700 source literature review of the evidence of negative health impacts as a result of various weather and environmental variables. And that can be things like, oh, on a day when it's 80-degree temperatures and 50% humidity, there were more ER visits, right, for asthma, right? So that daily breath risk index is what we call an evidence-based or study-based evidence risk index. And that's the daily breath risk index. Now, in principle, that's what will be refined to be your personalized risk index as we gather more information about your symptoms. Okay. But on that first screen, you get the risk index, you get some of the environmental variables. So you get your air quality index, you get your PM 2.5, you get your ozone, you get your allergens, and then you get your weather variables. And then on the bottom of that pop up, you have impacts and recommendations. And again, this goes back to the education process. People don't necessarily understand what the impact of hotter temperatures is on pollutants, right? And so those impact summaries would say, oh, okay, basically on days when you have hot temperatures, particulates tend to be more dense, and then therefore they're more easily inhalable into your lungs, and that affects your airways more dramatically, right? And so it has an impact summary, and then it has what I call daily recommendations. And so those are basic things like, perhaps if you're going outside, you'd prefer to go out in the morning. There's various evidence that says that certain times of the day are worse or better for pollution, right? There's certain evidence, that you should, consider wearing a mask. It says like today's really going to be bad. Don't forget to take your inhaler with you outside. Those kinds of things that are recommendations for people who have asthma or COPD are part of that whole panel. So the first step is that daily breath forecast, and that's what's informing you, making you environmentally aware of what are the conditions that are going to potentially impact you. And then when you X off that screen, which is a pop-up, then you see a map. And the second part of the value proposition for Daily Breath is we're not just tracking the what, which is what is causing you to have your symptoms, um, and but also the where. And so that's a very interesting component is when we have a user record their symptom, it records the geolocation on the map, which is interesting because it where they are having symptoms is a proxy for where pollution is bad within their community. And so suddenly over time, you start to crowdsource these symptoms on what I call the community map, right? You're also tracking on your own symptoms map where your symptoms are being experienced, which is another filter for risk, right? If you suddenly begin to realize every time you go to this particular soccer field, you're having symptoms, then you could maybe be allergic to some of the trees near that soccer field. It could be that maybe that soccer field is near a highway corridor, and so there's more pollutants there. So there's various things from a wear perspective that can help you understand where your risk is. And I also think that that's potentially something that's leverageable from a community perspective, because then you're beginning to understand where pollution is greatest and where, if you're going to do clean air initiatives within your community, here are areas where you potentially might want to target.
Other apps I know kind of do like they have this kind of index that shows you how bad the air is today and kind of all this stuff. What's different about Daily Breath that people may may not know about when it comes to learning more? Do y'all kind of give more of an in-depth reasoning about why the air is really bad that day? Do you kind of give like kind of a more in-depth answer and research as to kind of a why?
Yeah, so I mean, that's the goal of what those impact statements are. Over time, as we gather more evidence from the community about their symptoms and the specific variables that are occurring when they have symptoms, we're able to begin to build a knowledge base and improve those impact summary descriptions, right? So that we can actually explain, why the temperature and the humidity make ozone worse, right? Ozone is something that's it's an amalgamation of multiple pollutant conditions, right? That's what makes ozone. Various chemicals that mix in a particular way to create ozone, and we're learning more and more about like what temperature does to the ozone, what humidity does to the ozone. But the one thing I will say is, and I've gone through a constant journey. Initially, when I introduced the app, I was in the health and fitness category as a primary category. And then when I introduced the app in 2022, I switched it to weather because that's where air quality apps are. Recently, I've switched it back to health because what the key value that I'm bringing is I'm not just giving you an air quality index, and I'm not just tracking the severity of pollution. What I'm tracking is your personalized encounter with the air you breathe, right? And so, what we're trying to do is focus on the intersection of air quality with our health, right? So, that's why health and fitness are primary category now, because I wanted to focus on this is really about the air you breathe and your health, your personal health, right? It's not, oh, air quality is really, really bad. It's air quality is really bad and it's affecting me, right? And so it is trying to give that kind of personal approach to it. The other thing that I think is challenging at times too is people don't realize that some of the public health approaches to providing air quality data or air quality information are really very rudimentary right now. Okay. So most often the data that you view on, let's say, a weather channel app for the air quality reading on a weather channel app, that data is based on 5 kilometer or 3.1 mile gridded data. It's a model that's developed that calculates that for that particular radius. Well, think of it in terms of 3.1 miles. I mean, that's a huge amount of distance between one point and another, right? And they're saying that, well, that AQI is the whole range of 3.1 miles, right? So one of the things that I've been waiting for is a lot of these wearable air quality monitors, like an Atmo Tube Pro or something like that. There's also some mobility air quality sensor companies that are coming out that have 20-meter gridded data, which is a lot more, granular data, right? So it can really, really track pollutants that are very much closer to you and very much impacting you on a personal level. So the goal really for Daily Breath is to provide the most local environmental data, right? The most local, and then develop this personalized environmental health model.
During this whole process of trying to get this app and get this company up and going, what's been some obstacles and frustrations you've faced along the way to help develop a better solution?
Yeah, well, I mean, again, I think so. First of all, when I started the process, I thought that there was very granular data available, right? So in some ways, I joke with folks that I've talked to recently, I was 10 years ahead of my time because I had an idea or a vision for something where the market really wasn't necessarily advanced enough um, to really accommodate some of the things that I wanted to do, such as having, a very local environmental data source and providing very rich information that people could translate at a personal level that would change behavior, right? And that's one of the reasons I'm really focused right now on trying to accommodate local environmental data, because my argument is unless people really know that it's personal to them, they're not going to take preventative action, right? And so that's part of the thing is you're trying to marry up not just environmental awareness, but a level of environmental intelligence that drives action on a daily basis, right? Because at the end of the day, a lot of, I'll just use asthma as an example, right? And the average asthma sufferer may go to the ER, 2 to 3 times a year with difficulty, where symptoms become so severe they have to go to the ER. Well, imagine, what's the value of, $150 air purifier in the scheme of to potentially 2 or 3 ER visits, right? The cost of, for the patient could be $4 or $5,000 in ER visits, and yet it's only $150 to have an air purifier that may help that person prevent an asthma attack, and stuff like that. So, I think that was the barriers that the things that I needed that I that you really depend on to make it a viable product in the market space at the time that I started, really have not been available. And it's only now that I'm able to start looking at, okay, let's Bluetooth enable the app to connect to an Atmo 2 Pro so that if they purchase this local wearable air quality monitor, then it connects to my app, right? And then that becomes much more local environmental data. There's other sources too. Um, I think that's been the obstacle. I mean, I can talk a little bit about investment. I did a lot of investment at the beginning point, and like I said, the market was not really ready, and that becomes very much a challenge. If the market's not ready, I got to a point in 22 after my last $50,000 of investment, where I went out during COVID, and that was a plus and a minus, right? I mean, the COVID kind of introduced the idea of air quality being a concern, but at the same time, it really kind of stifled, the investment world to a certain extent. And so I've had to bootstrap the business now and really kind of move to a sense of urgency as I move into 2026, because I really need to start to cover my costs and then grow the business beyond that. And so I've developed a model. And again, the other thing too is, at least in healthcare, there's more of an appetite for people paying for apps. That's the other part that's somewhat of a challenge when you're going direct to consumer and you're delivering an app. As you probably know, I'm on a freemium model. There's a component of it that's free to start, right? But then there's certain features and functions that are paid functions, right? And I'm hoping to introduce a more valuable premium version of that in the spring that's going to be probably more of a higher price because, if I'm only going to go direct to consumer, I have to figure out a way to make money from the app. I do have affiliate revenue. That's where I kind of target some of these solutions that can be implemented by people. Air purifier company, an Atmo 2 Pro, all of these companies are affiliates of mine that I can sell their products. And that's one feature that I'll be adding is like a store module, that'll kind of say, here are here are specific products for personal air quality. Here are specific products for indoor air quality. Those kinds of things. So I'm trying to expand the revenue models that will help hopefully increase the revenues for the business.
What have did you do kind of a test run with the app before you officially launched it, and to see if people would really kind of support it, and kind of if people really liked it? What was some initial reviews you got for the app itself?
Well, so I convened a group of people who had allergy and asthma, and it was much more of a test group. I can't say I rolled it out to a larger universe of group. It was just more people getting feedback, giving me feedback directly. What I will say is that at the time there was a lot of demand for it in the sense that there just doesn't didn't seem to be a lot out there for air quality in general. Now, I think you've probably have seen there's a total proliferation of air quality apps out there, and there's a total proliferation of now weather that incorporates air quality, right? Data and metrics and stuff like that. So, but at the time that I started, it was definitely something that wasn't necessarily um, available. Okay. There were asthma apps out there when I met with these groups, these allergy and asthma groups, but there was no one that was really providing rich information about allergens or about pollutants, and connecting those two with an asthma app. Most asthma apps really are tracking medications and various things like that and have diaries. They have diaries like symptom diaries, but they don't necessarily connect those symptoms to weather and environmental variables, right? Which is what the app tries to do. There would always be like some of the asthma apps that they compared it to. They would say the asthma app has something that says record your symptom, but then it says, do you think your symptom was caused by? And then the person would self-report whether they thought it was related to a pollutant or an allergen or a weather condition or something like that. So what they found really compelling at the time was the fact that I was trying to connect real time weather and environmental data or information with what was going on with the symptom, right? I was correlating kind of the symptom with potential triggers.
What's kind of some future goals that you have for Daily Bread? Do you see it kind of becoming more of do you see it expanding more? Do you kind of um see it kind of go beyond the app? Or are you trying to get more of a community kind of to come together? What's some future goals?
Yeah, yeah. So I've struggled back and forth with that, and I can honestly say I'm not sure which direction I want to go right now. Um, there are some aspects, a discussion board, a friends list. There are some aspects of community that I could bring into the equation. That's one approach. The other approach is to really focus on kind of the secret sauce, which is really the personalized risk index and kind of the mapping. Um, but what I will say is, what's interesting is we're still kind of in the phase of trying to validate use cases for the use of a lot of this weather and environmental data. And I'm talking to some of my data providers, for my app about, how can we offer, pediatricians or allergy and asthma specialists, something that they could utilize within their own EHR for the patient, but that could be connected with DailyBreath so that we can send that symptom information to the patient's doctor, right? So that the patient's doctor would benefit from seeing what their triggers are and some of those things. So that's one area. The other area that we're trying to validate, and again, these are business to consumer areas, would be corporate wellness. We're trying to talk a little bit about kind of an environmental wellness program because indoor air quality is an issue for many corporations, their buildings that they're in. So that's another area. And then the third area is really pharma companies have kind of become very much interested in kind of having patient facing apps and or participating in patient facing apps. And so I've talked to some pharmacy models where you know whether it's medication related, whether it's tracking medication adherence, because medication adherence within the asthma community and COPD community is very challenging. Only 50% of medications are taken on a daily basis, even though they're prescribed daily, right? So there's some concerns within that particular community. So, even though I'm continuing to focus on the business to consumer market and, making some steps to potentially accelerate that path, I'm also trying to look at what are the business to business models that I can potentially explore that would be able to grow revenue for that particular direction as well. And I think that's, like I said, that's just been more of a growing area where I think it's finally coming to a tipping point where certainly for specific um, situations like a pediatrician in the case of childhood asthma, or in the case of allergy and asthma specialists, they are beginning to look at it and go, okay, well, we know these conditions like wildfire smoke events, right? We know those conditions are causing more asthma ER visits when those things are present. So maybe there's a role for a patient facing app that would help alert the doctors that, hey, there's a wildfire smoke event and some patients are experiencing these symptoms, right? And they may require either a visit or something like that. So those are areas where we're still trying to expand, but candidly, my biggest challenge in the next several months is to really build a package, a premium version of this app, calling it DailyBreath Personal, that has the most local environmental data, that has this personalized environmental approach, and has a paid model that's going to be hopefully something that can generate monthly recurring revenue. Like it'll be 49 cents a month, or $3 a year, or I might even have a lifetime purchase fee, like one time $9.99 or something like that. Because the fact of the matter is we'll be storing their data for 5, 10, 15 years, who knows how long, right? And that will be their authoritative source for how they experience the air they breathe, for the future. So that's kind of my near-term goal, is kind of get this premium version off the mark, and then look, explore some of these business to business opportunities to see if they're viable, in 2026.
What's been some of the feedback you've received overall from people that have downloaded the app and have used it? Have you seen a change in how people are taking their symptoms more seriously? Have you seen a change in how people are reacting to the app?
So, I mean, what a lot of what I'm tracking is metrics. So, all I'll say is that, since 2022, I have like over 5,000 recorded symptoms on the back end, right? And of that group, one person has 18 symptoms recorded in the last 3 years, 3.5 years. So 18 symptoms. Um, all the way down to obviously one, right? And I think that when I look at those metrics, it's, people are having more symptoms and recording more symptoms than I think we probably historically think of people having symptoms, um, that they're correlating to, air quality, right? And I think that's been part of the thing is, you're trying to convince allergy and asthma specialists that, this is something that patients actually experience. So the feedback I've gotten is that, I'm always surprised because, like, I'll get feedback that says I check this app every day, you know, and that's what we want. That's the kind of the North Star is we want, we believe that obviously the air quality is impacting their health. And so, my vision for Daily Breath Forecast was always, and the reason I coined it that way was I always envisioned, like, what's the first thing you do to start the day? Many people, one of the first things that they do in the first 15 minutes of their day is check the weather. They check a weather app, right? And my point was, well, if you have a health condition that you think is impacted by the weather and the environment, then you should go to Daily Breath Forecast first because it's going to provide you a personalized environmental risk index, right? And so that's been my North Star vision from the very beginning, is trying to figure out how do I get that to be part of the routine, right? Of certainly if you have asthma or COPD, one of the things you need to do is have daily breath on your phone, and within the first 15 minutes a day, be checking it to say what are the recommendations for today. Oh, one of the things I've been trying to do too. I mean, I envision a world where if you track your daily breath risk index, and it's personal, then what you will discover over time is that your thresholds are unique to you. And so imagine if you can connect even to your air purifier in your home, and your air purifier only comes on when it hits a threshold, the air quality monitor within the home hits a threshold that has already been shown to be personal to you, right? Based on the Daily Breath app, right? So that's the kind of world where I kind of envision is, can we get to this place where you have various things, you know, that when the air quality is bad, it's triggered to go on because it's recognizes your personal vulnerability, right? Something like that. So I don't know if that's possible. Again, I think that that's the vision for kind of what we're trying to do. Um, but it's trying to get it used, more and more on a daily basis. The other thing we're trying to do is integrate. There's things called smart inhalers, which I can connect the app to the smart inhaler, because that would be another way of recording a symptom. It's a digital way of stamping a symptom because they're using their rescue inhaler at that time. So that's another thing that we're looking at as well. So there's a lot of integration opportunities to make the app more valuable, I think. Um, but I think the idea, from my perspective, is how do I get as many people as possible to do that first step, which is like I check my daily breath forecast every day, that kind of thing.
What's kind of the overall message that you would like people to know about Daily Breath, and if people are interested in maybe downloading the app and seeing what the app offers for them, kind of feel free to promote it, and what's kind of the overall
Sure.
message?
Yeah. So I mean, again, I think the message most is that, you know, um, the air you breathe impacts your health. Um, we're aiming to make you environmentally aware, learn environmental intelligence through daily breath, and then take preventative action so that you can reduce uh, potential health impacts. And, www.dailybreath.com is our landing page. You can find the app on the App Store, just Daily Breath, the air you breathe. in Apple App Store and Google Play. And, I just think that part of it is comes back to, the slogans. It's, track, learn, know, and act, right? Track your symptoms, learn your triggers, and then take action. And that it is personal. How you respond to the air you breathe is personal, and it's not going to be sufficient just to look at an air quality index that doesn't have granular data. It's a good way of a community looking at where poor air quality is and trying to address it from that perspective. But I've talked to some partners that were trying to create healthy paths, like I described to you the maps, right? So we're trying to figure out some functionality where somebody could type a starting point and an ending point, and it would give them the healthiest route, whether that's a commute via a vehicle, whether that was a walk in your community, whether that's a run. But that would be kind of called healthy path. The other thing we're trying to do is based on the symptom map and having particular areas in a community with more symptoms or less symptoms, we're going to try to create what we call healthy zones. And so those zones are recognized as healthier because there's less symptoms being experienced because of poor air quality, right? And so we're trying to look at some of those models. But my big message, to folks is really to recognize that environmental triggers do impact our health. Pollutants, outdoors, indoors, they do impact your health, and that you're not at the mercy of the weather and the environment. You can take action. There's preventative steps you can take to clean and clear the air you breathe, and improve your health, or certainly avoid bad outcomes associated with these triggers.
Well, Eric, I appreciate you so much for coming on here and sharing this app and sharing this company with me. I think it is an important thing for people to know about. For someone that suffers from allergies and has dealt with allergies since I was a baby. Yeah, I think for
Mhm.
people like us, it's a huge lifesaver to have. Um, to my listeners, I will put his website link down in the description box below. I'll also include some links to his app so that if you would like to download the app, there will be direct links to that as well. Feel free to check it out. His app's available now, Daily Breath. It's available in the Apple App Store as well as Google Play. Feel free to follow. Make sure to go to his website to learn more information about the company and learn more about the app. If you would like to keep me updated on the social media side, feel free to follow the podcast on Instagram and TikTok at Lethal Venom Podcast, as well as Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube at Noah's Podcast. And you can also listen to Lethal Venom wherever you get your podcasts from. I'm available on all the major platforms: Spotify, Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Pandora. It's everywhere, so feel free to subscribe so that you'll get notified of when new episodes come out. And also make sure to leave good reviews and rate it. It really does help the podcast out and helps it grow. Reaches more people, so I really appreciate it if you would um, more than welcome to do that. Thank you to everyone for tuning in today's episode. Hope you all enjoyed it. Y'all be safe out there, make good decisions. Hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you all in the next episode of Lethal Venom.